Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. I am your host on this occasion, Peter Donegan. The truth behind me hosting this podcast is quite simple. For a bazillion episodes, a gentleman by the name of Joel Barnett has been nothing but absolutely wonderful, chivalrous and eloquent in how he has helped to promote the horticulture industry en masse in Australia, in particular in Melbourne or that region. I had the honour to meet him and be part of making a garden beside him at MIFGS 2023. Not only is he uberly talented at what he does for a living, but again, I'll say what he gives back to the industry. And my note to him some time ago was he should be a guest on his own podcast. So Joel Barnett, welcome to the Landscaping Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I've been listening for so long.
It's a really funny one, but the ultimate question that comes to me always in show gardens is, why would you do that? It's a question you've answered regularly on your own podcast, but to bring it back to this one, why start a landscaping podcast? Why do it? And what was the catalyst for it?
Well, the answer would be similar to both questions about why would you do a show garden and why would you start a podcast. Is that's just because I love landscaping that much. Like it's my hobby, and I just so happen to get paid for it. So yeah, I love listening to podcasts. So that's why I wanted to sort of create ones that I would want to listen to as well. And I actually do listen to them like everyone else does, even though I've already had the conversation and then edited it. I still like listening back to it because I hear things that I don't remember being said during the chat. So it's like I get to choose the guests who I listen to because I put them on the podcast. So it's a great way to do that.
What's the greatest criticism you get, or do you get any, not to dwell on a negative, but do you get any negative feedback on it?
Not that I can recall. Like it's one of those things. Like I've got no doubt there'd be people who would talk shit about it, but not necessarily directly to me. But I couldn't care less because I don't do it to please anyone or for any reason other than to do it. Basically, like I do it because I enjoy doing it, and if other people benefit out of it, that's awesome. If not, they can please themselves. I don't care.
So how many episodes are you in now?
I've done 123 at the time of recording this one.
Over how many years?
It just, I think it just went over 2 years since the first episode. So yeah, it was in May 2021, which is a while ago.
But like and don't get me wrong, I'm playing devil's advocate here, and we know each other well enough for me to ask the questions, and you appreciate that I'm probably asking things that maybe others have in their head. But you've got a business, you've got a family, you've got friends who like you, I assume, and we'll come back to a gentleman by the name of Ashley James in just a little bit, who deserves an accolade all by himself for varying other reasons. But at the same token, now we're both smiling, but at the same token, when there are better things to be doing maybe in your spare time, do you get the question? We know it's not for money, and I'm a huge fan of yours as well, but like the questions are still multiples of why.
It doesn't take as much time as what it seems like it would. I actually surprised myself when I think back. There's been 123 episodes, and I do 2 a week now. It surprises me that I do that and still have time for all the other things like the business and doing that sort of thing. But some of the episodes I record with the guests I record at. I'll try and do most of them around 4:30. So kids are home from school, then they're just sort of unwinding from school. I can finish work a little bit earlier so I can get home and do those recordings. So they're the ideal ones. So that's just an hour out of the day that doesn't really make much of a difference to anything. And then when I edit them on a Sunday, so I'll get up early in the morning and do that most of the time. So it might take 2 hours, but I'll get up at 6 o'clock, and then by 8 o'clock I'm done with that. So then upload it for the next day. And then the reason I started doing the Q&A ones, the first one I did was because I didn't have an episode to put out on that Monday. So I just had to make it up. And then I enjoyed it so much that I kept doing it. And then, so I wanted to answer the questions, and then I knew I would have to record it. So rather than just sitting in my booth recording, like talking to the screen, I thought I'd make it an Instagram live so other people can watch if they want and add a question if they want to. So it's if I didn't want to do the lives, I would still do that recording. But yeah, like me and my mates, we hardly see each other because everyone's just so busy with, work and kids. So it's hard for that anyway. Like the podcast certainly doesn't stop me from doing anything. I don't say, no, I can't do this because I've got to do a podcast. The good example of that is an Instagram live one that I normally do on Sunday nights. And we had friends coming over on a Sunday night. So that's when I pushed it back to a Monday. So yeah, it seems like it would take a lot of time, but I just work it in around what I want to do.
You're pretty blatant, by way of compliment, but you're blatantly honest in your Q&A. You have no holes barred in saying, this is how much we charge per hour, or this is how you price a job. Do you get a little bit of stick maybe over that? Because invariably, if you go to any garden designer's website, including my own, prices are sort of kept a little bit on the QT. And when you speak about, for example, your journey from landscaping into garden design, you open all doors for everybody to see. Do you get criticized for that part of it?
Again, no one does to my face, but I'll no doubt, like I spoke about, one of the questions someone asked was, is $99 now too much to charge for a landscaper? And I said, that's pretty much what I charge. And like, I've got no doubt there's people who charge more than that, and they're looking at me thinking, oh, you're not charging enough. But I've also spoken about how what I charge isn't relevant to what someone else is charging, because we've all got different costs. We all want to make a different amount of money. Like, I don't live in Sydney, which is one of the most expensive places to live in. So I don't need to make as much money as people who do live in Sydney. So things are more expensive there. But yeah, again, if someone did have a go at me about anything I said on it, I couldn't care less, because that's my life. That's what I charge, and it doesn't bother me what other people think about what I charge.
I don't think anybody's going to have a go at you, because I think everybody pretty much adores you, to be fair, Joel. It irates me slightly by way of compliment, but at the same token, you're a pretty good guy. Everybody seems to smile in your company. It certainly was the case at Mifkus, and I've never heard anybody complain about you. I think there's just a bit where you've turned around and said, if you want to set up a business, listen to my podcast, because now you know what to charge. All doors are open. Fair?
Yeah. I wouldn't want anyone to think that. Like, I would rather tell them how to work out how much to charge, not what to charge on certain elements. Because that's something an important note I try and ram home as often as I can, is that you need to do what's best for you, not what other people are doing.
I want to segue into what you usually have as your intro podcast, but your intro question, my apologies, but to bring it to the Joel Barnett episode as versus the landscaping podcast host interview, if I may. How did you first get started in the trade? What was the first job? What was your first day?
Well, technically in the trade, I worked at a golf course as a greenkeeper there. So sitting on a ride-on lawnmower. That was pretty cool, because I had never ridden a ride-on lawnmower before, and they're pretty fancy ones, so nice big expensive ones. I was only mowing the fairways. I didn't get onto the greens. So that's what made me realize I liked working outside, but we had to start at 4:00 in the morning, which is not ideal. I think it was in November. So yeah, it was warmer. Could have been worse. It was in winter, but that was my first job technically in the green industry. And that's what made me realize I wanted to work outside. And I don't know how, but I came across landscaping and saw that there were so many different trades involved with it. So tried to get an apprenticeship with that. Went through the yellow pages and sent I think I mailed out my resume to like every landscaper in the phone book, and didn't get a job that way. So ended up studying horticulture and got a job. The guy I worked for first, he contacted the school where I was studying to see if there was anyone who wanted an apprenticeship, and that's how I got the first job as an apprentice.
What age were you then?
I think I was 21 when I got that. Yeah, just turned 21.
And it's hard to tell because you've got jet black hair, but what age are you now?
I'm now 27, so it's been a long 6 years.
Why are we both smiling?
Just turned 40 about 5 months ago.
Okay. So when you did your first stint in cutting grass, is there a bit before that which invariably most people in horticulture landscaping will say, oh, my grandmother was into plants or my father was into, is there any connection in there?
No, like my mum worked for her brother for a tiny bit because they owned a nursery, and then they got, like, it was only a really small nursery and they didn't have it very long. And then they did a job on the Geelong waterfront where they were sort of doing some planting, and I remember her doing that, but I didn't have anything to do with it. My dad's always been he's been in dry cleaning and selling carpets, so he never did anything related to it. So, and mum was a hairdresser apart from that, so nothing related to that. No, my grandparents didn't have any. My grandfather actually had an amazing veggie garden like everyone did back in the day. It was like, yeah, some of the most amazing soil you could ever see. But I just remember that just, as a memory, not so much that I was interested in at the time. So there's no links like that. But I do love when I talk to people and they've got a link where they, were gardening from when they were 6 years old and that sort of thing. But I don't have that.
No. Well, I think that's a Peter reference in a sense. But to bring it back to you as versus my ginormous head, when you said to your mom and dad that you were going into the world of horticulture, to put a title on it, how or what was their response then at 17 years of age?
Yeah, they weren't they were happy just for me to do whatever I wanted to, but they didn't think I'd enjoy it as much as I did right from the start. Just when I was studying the certificate in horticulture, I then I remember we were at a family birthday party for like all their relatives there, and I was like naming some of the plants that were around the place just because I could, and they were like blown away that I could do that because I was never good at school or anything, so it wasn't very academic at all. So they were quite surprised. Because it's one of those things, you get good at things that you enjoy doing. So it's just the things I was learning at school I didn't like, but I had the ability to learn them, but just didn't enjoy it, so I didn't.
But botanical, so if I translate it into how we do our school, we do the Irish language, and we would obviously take something like German or French. Don't get me wrong, I'm not referencing me here, but when I speak to people in the trade, they will tell me exactly what you said. Wasn't great at school, but as soon as it gets to botanical Latin, they just fell in love with the thing. Were you one of those who got that ovalifolia moria variegata, the simplicity of it when you finally sort of cracked the code, if I may? Is that what caught your attention?
Yeah, not straight away, but then when their teachers were sort of explaining how those words explain about the plant, that's what made me realize it. And then I'd look at a plant and I'd think, that looks a bit like a jasmine. So is that maybe jasminoides? Well, and yeah, that was right. Just similar things to that.
And don't get me wrong, in all of the things, and I've been listening to your podcast for a while now, you are a particularly clever fella, and I don't think you do it intentionally, but you let people know that you are particularly clever. And again, I'll reiterate what you said. You don't sort of ram it's the dad lecture home. It's more, here's how I do it. And if you want to follow a sort of example of it, that's up to you. But this isn't me schooling you on what to do. Take me then from 17 grass cutting to getting the first job with a landscaper, and how big of a day was that? What age were you then?
Yes, I was 21 when I started my apprenticeship, and I still remember. I remember getting home. I'd get home at 4:00, sit on the couch, and I'd fall asleep because I was that exhausted from like just the work that you do. and we didn't work anywhere near as hard as what we do now back then. So it was just, and so I still see guys who start working for me how exhausted they get. Sometimes I forget how hard it is because it just comes natural now. But yeah, I like the first. Like I was useless when I started. One of the guys on an episode that's not out yet, he recommended having my first boss on as a guest, which I'm gonna try and do. I haven't spoken to him yet, but I'll try and get him on so he can explain how useless I was at the start. Like on the first day, I hit my thumb with a hammer, like the stereotype, like the cliche. Just yeah, had no idea what I was doing. And I kind of need to think back to that every now and then, like when I put on a new employee about how bad I was when I started. But some of them make it hard to realize that there might be potential in them. But yeah, I can't remember if I loved it from the start as much as I do now. I definitely wouldn't have loved it as much as I do now, but I did really enjoyed how much variance there was in what you did, and we were changing jobs and just learning so much. Like I always like learning something, so it was cool because like if you're doing a different trade, you're probably just doing a lot of the same different things within that trade. But landscaping, you're doing all the different trades, so there's always, and I'm still learning now.
So you've got to, do I say you had a bad first day when you go home and mom says to you, "How did you get on, son?" You're going, I don't want to just stay. I'm locking myself in my room type day. Does it get worse? Does it get better? And what was the point at which you turned around to yourself and said, I think I've got it. Today is a better day." Does that make sense to you, that question?
Yeah, I didn't have a bad first day. It was just it was a stupid first day because I hit my thumb with a hammer, like you see on cartoons. Like you would see Wile E. Coyote might do to himself. So it was literally like that and was throbbing, and yeah. But yeah, I reckon I was a fan early on. It's such a long time ago, I can't remember exactly my thoughts, but I remember talking to a fella who, like, I had a mate from England who used to come over every 6 months to play cricket, and I can remember him going to a party when he was there, and I was telling him how awesome it was. So I reckon I liked it right from the start.
Did you have a bit where you turned around? I know, I'll give you an example maybe of my own, and I think I was 17, 18, and you're right, I think there were moments where it was hard slog, it was physical. You came home, certainly slept on the couch, and then there were days where even though you were tired, there's without sounding overly poetic, but there's a sort of a sunshine in your head and in your heart. And I think for me, it was doing the first rooftop garden on top of a multi-story car park. You stand back and you're looking at it going, that's not a bad day. You still work the same million miles an hour, and you were still as banjaxed would be the word, as tired. You still fell over and lay there for an elongated period of time. But in your case, the bit, I think, for, again, referring to myself, but the bit for me that made me turn around and say, I've got to figure out a pathway to doing this for myself. What was that day for you?
Well, there were times like where, and I think a lot of apprentices do it, you hit a bit of a wall where you sort of start to get to a middle of the road section where you've learned a lot, so you almost think you know everything, but then you're still having to do all the grunt work and that sort of thing. And I remember there was times where I was in charge, when I was a first year apprentice, I was in charge of a few labourers we had on site. And I hated that because I didn't want to tell anyone what to do. So I just hated every time I was in charge of them. But then I realised how beneficial that was for me to learn those skills. And then the projects when we were working on pools, they always got me really excited. So I thought they were just, such an expensive thing to have. So they always got me excited. But I did hit a patch where I got sick of it. The money I was on, I reckon it was after I was qualified. So then I looked into being a firefighter and went and almost got selected for that. But then, I can't remember how it all happened, but I decided that I was going to go out on my own because I think I was getting a lot more responsibility when I was qualified. So my boss would give me a lot more responsibility. So then I started to realize that I could do it by myself because I never had any plans. Like I said I'll never work for myself because I just didn't want to have that responsibility, and just didn't have any interest in doing it. But then I started doing a lot of the things where you think you're running a job. I actually wasn't, but I thought I was doing a lot of the organisation and everything. So I thought I could do it myself. So that's when I decided to go out on my own and then set up a deal with my boss. So he said, if you stay on for another 12 months, then we'll do this transition period, and went from there.
Day one, what year? What's Joel's first day with InStyle Gardens?
As in when I took over it, or
when you started? Yeah, you start running it. Your first day on the job. What year? What?
It was the 9th of November 2009. So
wow.
So my boss had already had a job booked in, and it was, the plan was that was going to be the one I took over. Don't think I made any money on that one, but then there was a big job after that, which had to be done before Christmas, and I took over in November. So I ended up working there. I think it was 42 days in a row up until Christmas Eve to get that job finished. So it took me quite a few years after that to realize I should not work that far into December. But yeah, the last 4 years have been good. So that's something that took a while to learn to say no and not fill up that period of December, because you can always fill it up or just finish early.
2009, based on my maths, you are 26 years of age.
Yep.
You, outside of me, I think I went out on my own at 24, going 25. You're the next youngest person I know to go out on their own and, still be in business to this day.
Yeah, it's funny when you when I see the guys who work for me at what age they are, and I think I've been running my business for a few years already where they are. But I didn't feel young at the time. It kind of felt late, because I felt like I started landscaping late, even though I was only 21, just because I'd done work. I worked in hospitality before that as well. So it didn't feel like I was young. But then the older you get, like when I had kids, then I was relating to the clients so much more. I've just felt I felt like a lot more confidence the older I get, obviously, with that.
What were you doing in hospitality?
I just hated it. I worked at an over 35s nightclub. So that was pretty amazing. You can imagine, and that's when I was 18. So the women who were over 35, they were pretty excited to see a young 18-year-old there. So there was some horrible words that were said to me during those nights. But yeah, and I worked at a work in a restaurant. So just some high end places I worked at.
I'm glad we've segued past the 35 to 18-year-old conversation, Joel. Appreciate it very much. Let's go back. Let's go back to the actual work in hospitality. How bad did that get? And on one hand, how good of an experience in hindsight was it?
Can't think. It's such a long time ago. I can't think of any good things from it or bad. Really, it was just. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really thought about the experiences with that. It was good. Like met a lot of good people when I was working there. But yeah, I don't think anything that I did there has helped. No, I was just thinking about it today. Actually, I remember one of my bosses, because I was walking with a drinks tray going to pick up some drinks, but I was just walking, holding it down by my side. And I remember him telling me to hold it up, so that almost like a I don't know how you describe it, but basically my arm was bent so the tray was flat, so that like you would hold drinks on there one-handed, just to help with the presentation. So you're not just a guy just walking with bad posture carrying a tray by the side, walking through the gaming room. You actually have look smart doing it, and that's something at the time I thought, yeah, whatever. That's because I was just 18 thinking, what's this guy know? But then, yeah, it's just that the image that they wanted to portray in their place.
How did you get a job in an over 35s only nightclub anyway?
So they had a bottle shop and a gaming venue and a bar. So I had a bit of everything there. I can't remember how I got the job. Like I think my family might have known them. But yeah, I worked there for about a year and a half, I think. And I would work in all three areas. I work in the bottle shop in like the afternoon, and then I'd work in the nightclub or the gaming room, and you'd be working till 5 a.m. some days. So yeah, good times.
Did you have a particularly bad day there that stands out to you? I mean, how bad, if you hated it and you stayed for a year and a half, there's a slight juxtaposition in my head. You do get this. So
It
I'm
was good.
thinking there should be.
It was good money for my age. I earned probably what I earned. I was earning there because I think I was casual as well. So I was earning probably, I don't know, $28 an hour, and I didn't earn that in landscaping until I was qualified. So there was real good money. But I
It's
hated
back to
dealing
going
with
out.
drunk. Hated dealing with drunk people because they're just unreasonable.
I can tell you they are not. We leave stereotyping particularly to one side in this occasion. Talk to me about being out on your own. You've done it, and this amount of time later, from '09 to 23, 14 years on, there's no person I've spoke to who's in business for themselves. They may not say it publicly, and I understand why. But when I describe having a bad day, sometimes it can be one person's one worded comment. Sometimes it's somebody decided not to pay their bills. But either which way, anybody I know who's in the landscaping, horticulture, garden design business in particular, they've all paced the garden at 4 o'clock in the morning, wondering either A, what am I doing, or B, how do I get out of this, or C, that just got to me. Strong and I'd say arrogant, but not arrogant, but strong and confident as I might be, there's always one moment that you just scratch your head and go, I wish this hadn't have happened. And I'm being very polite in how I word this. What was yours?
There was a job we did there was a pool going in, and we had to build a retaining wall before the pool went in. So we were building an L-shaped retaining wall. We did that, and then the pool went in, and they measured off the retaining wall so it was perfectly in line with that. And then we were doing a French ashlar pattern paving around the pool and back up to the house. And then I realized once the pool went in that I hadn't measured the retaining wall properly. So I think it was out over a 15-meter section. It was out of parallel with the house. I think it was by about 120 mil. So then when the ashlar pattern got to the house, there was going to be a slither of paving against the house, so it was going to be extremely obvious. And the guy was a line marker, so like he painted roads, like painted the lines on the road. So he had a really good eye. So of all the people to do it to, that was the worst possible job you could do it on. So that was almost everything that you could possibly think of that could go wrong went wrong on that one job. So that was an absolute nightmare. Felt horrendous about it. So what we had to do was, with the pattern, we'd over like a 15-meter section, we'd cut 12 mil off, 12 mil at one end down to 0 at the other. I think it was off about, I reckon it was more than 10 rows. So it must have been more than that was out. So that the pattern gradually swung back around and was parallel with the house. So we cut, 12 mil to 11 mil off here, and then 11 to 11, and then 11 to 10. So we're just cutting all these pavers. So we probably spent 2 days cutting, a wedge out of the pavers so that it wasn't enough to be noticeable, but it swung the pattern around. So yeah, that was easily the worst day, or worst job that was done.
But that says a lot about you, that you didn't turn around and go, I'm being facetious here. You didn't get sort of a quick fix marzipan, I don't know, glue something and just pour in a little bit of cement and go, there you are, good luck to you. You seem to have taken, similar to me, the long-term approach that there's a right way to do this. I'm going to lose a few bob here, or get hurt financially particularly badly, it's going to be painful and arduous, but it's the right thing to do. And I think you alluded to it in your comment. You couldn't do it to a guy like that, full stop.
Yeah. And because the pattern, the way, because it's actually curving by doing that, if you're looking the opposite way, you should look down those lines and they're not in line. But because it's a French Ashlar pattern, the lines don't continue through. They're kind of broken up every now and then by a paver. So like I could see it, but he reckons he couldn't see that it did that. So we did a good enough job that we passed that. So, but yeah, there was other things that went wrong as well on that job. So it was just a nightmare job, that one.
Is that the worst, or have you got a one that's it?
By far and away, that's the worst one. Like we got because I hate doing excavation, so we got a bobcat driver on there to do some excavation, and he hit like I told him that he dug far enough, and we could clear out the rest with a shovel. Because I find excavator and bobcat drivers, they like to prove that you can do everything with the machine, even though there's like, a 30, like a cricket ball size bit of soil to get. They'll just have to use their machine to get it, even though you could use a shovel. So I told him that was enough. I'll just get that last bit with the shovel. And then he goes, no, I'll get it with the machine. Then he got his machine there and hit the water pipe. He didn't break it. It was a copper pipe. But he kind of pulled it out a little bit. So then he just pushed it back in with the machine. And then an hour later, the client came outside and said, is there anything happened with the water? And he goes, no, nothing happened. He goes, it's just, there's a weird, there's like rust coming out of it. And then it stopped working. He goes, no, I don't know. We haven't hit it. So we haven't broken the water pipe. So there's nothing wrong. And then it turns out that he dislodged some like old rust or something inside the pipe that got its way into the hot water system, clogged that up. So we had to replace the hot water system filter. And yeah, he still thinks it's got nothing to do with him. So yeah. And there was other things as well. I can't remember. I tried to block it out, but yeah, so many things went wrong on that job.
What is Joel Barnett's psychology when you've ultimately got your head in your hands and you're saying this can't get any worse? And I know we laugh about it, and I reference when we were on holidays as one of 8 children in a mobile home that leaked, or a tent that leaked in 1984 or something. And in hindsight, me and my brothers and sisters, we giggle about it. But at the time, mom is crying, the sandwiches are wet, you think it can't get worse. All of a sudden you get a puncher and you realize there's no sat nav. It's 1984. You referenced it there. You're in telephone book land. Most of the Daniel Althouses of this world don't even know what those things are. young whippersnappers is ultimately boy band members, as Ashley James would fall bang into that category. We'll come to him later on. But when it can't get any worse, the point of reference in this, Joel, is that you need a good leader who will turn around and go, give me one moment, goes off into the corner behind the shed, puts his head in his hands there, slaps himself in the forehead, walks straight back out to, if I might call it, the team or the troops, and says, okay, here's how we get out of this one. Here's the plan. You, this. Because weeping, rightly so, doesn't pay the mortgage. Does that make sense with you? Does that sit with your psychology?
Yeah, I've sort of changed to that. I improved my skills on doing that a lot more in the last few years when I've sort of changed my mindset about everything. But also quite, and I think you have to be very solution based in landscaping. So the first guy I worked for made me watch a movie. I think it was called, I always forget. I think it was Heartbreak Ridge. It was a Clint Eastwood movie. And because he goes, the meaning behind that movie, like the reoccurring theme in that movie is, he said it's relatable to landscaping. And it's, he always says that they improvise, adapt, and overcome. That's what his troop did. And I find we do that a lot in landscaping. So you improvise, adapt, and overcome. So overcoming things is pretty important. You have to do that. and we're always coming up with different ideas that we have to improvise on how we do things and fix other people's work as well. So that's always been in my mind since I started, thanks to that first guy I worked for. But then my own personal thing I've been doing in the last few years is just having a positive mindset on things, because there's no point being negative about it, because that doesn't help anything. So you're better off thinking about the positive, thinking about the best way to do things and what the best result is. And like you said before, things are going to cost you money, but you want to be able to walk away with your head as high as you can. Like, even though you've made a mistake, you still want to be able to fix it so that you're as happy as you can be in that situation.
Well, bad news travels pretty fast, Joe. And as I found out from this hemisphere to your hemisphere, it really is the smallest industry I've ever been a part of. To put that in context, I know I was speaking with Mark Gregory at Royal Windsor Flower Show last week in London. And our friend, your former guest, Martin Semkin, came up in conversation, and it transpires that Mark's stepson had gone and done some work with Martin Semkin around about 2019, 2020. So it transpires I would have ended up, and Martin's done Chelsea anyway. So it really, really is that small in industry. And I don't think I'd be sitting here talking to you, or I think you would have found about me and I would have found out about you equally, if you will. Does that make sense? Do you find that is the case in the industry? Do you find it gets smaller again when you get into Melbourne, Victoria?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Especially, yeah, it's crazy, all the links that people have to each other. But yeah, it is pretty crazy when you think about it, about how many people know each other through someone else.
Quick fire around for you. Television programs, number one, not gardening and gardening. Do you watch them? Which is your favorite?
I don't. I only watch the football. That's all I watch. The AFL.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I don't know why I'm laughing.
But yeah,
it's pretty.
I used to think people were weird, like when you'd say, oh, I don't watch that much TV. I think, yeah, whatever. Obviously, you must watch it, but I don't.
Gardening magazines, do you read them?
Nah.
No. Gardening podcasts, I know you do listen to. What have you got? A top 2, 3?
The landscaping podcast is my favorite. That's your podcast, obviously. And I like the Landscaping Victoria one, the Front Garden podcast. I've mentioned them.
Two gentlemen.
Yeah, I've mentioned them a lot in my episodes, and I've only been mentioned once on there, so it's interesting side note there. There might be competitiveness there.
Highly unlikely. I have to say they're two absolute gentlemen as well, I should add. Yeah. Although both of them do look a little bit like, again, third time mentioned from, but Ashley James it just seems to keep cropping up over and over and over again.
Well, they look like him.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, a bit. Yeah, I think it's just, if they all wore white trousers, they'd all be in a boy band together.
I think you're being racist. You're saying all Australians look the same.
No, it's not. Boy bands are boy bands. Take me all the way back then. You're at home. It's a Friday evening. It's a Saturday morning, Sunday. What do you do with your spare time?
I'll be just scrolling through Instagram if I'm not working, because I do a lot of work at night. But if I'm not working, I'll be watching football or scrolling through Instagram. I enjoy doing that.
You bring the kids to the park?
No, they got no interest in going there, so they're happy enough entertaining themselves. So that's also part of the why I've got time to do stuff, because they like doing things together, or they don't like doing stuff with me. That's for sure.
One thing you'd change about the industry, if you could?
Wouldn't be. I was going to say it wouldn't be as physically hard, but I do enjoy that part of it. Probably higher paying. That'd be nice.
Take money out of the equation. What is the one thing you would change about the horticulture industry in Australia?
Nothing I could think of. Because if there was something I could think of, I would try and change it. Like there's things like joining the Landscaping Victoria board, where you can get on there and try and make a change in the industry. But There's nothing that stands out to me that I think is worth changing. So I'm sorry, which is a horrible answer. Sorry, but yeah.
You're the worst guest I've ever had on this podcast.
Also the best.
Yeah, well, that's very true as well, but only by default. You hit the nail on the head, and they were particularly kind to me. But Landscape Victoria, to be very, very fair, I know Martin's daughter Nicole was or is a part of the board or one of the offsets of a board. I'm unsure on that one exactly, or but I know Nicole is a part of it and had to leave the garden at Mifkas to go and do her, rightly so, her duty and give a little bit back. They were also very kind to me, I have to say, before going over, and it was a beautiful welcome when I got there. So as individuals, and then also as an association, they seem to tick a lot of boxes, work particularly hard, but also promote themselves extremely well. How important is it for you to be a part of that association and the work that they do?
I support them because of the work that they do, but there's like they do put a lot of emphasis on how important it is to be a member. But I know a lot of good landscapers who aren't members, so I don't think you have to be a member to be a good landscaper. But I see all the positive that they do, so that's why I pay a membership every year. And then it's just a benefit of being able to go to events that they host and catch up with other landscapers. So I think I think it'd be crazy not to be involved because of all the benefits you get out of being a member. I like going to the events, but you only get out what you put in. So if you're just going to pay your membership and not do anything with it, then you're not getting as much benefit out of it. But yeah, actually getting off your ass and getting involved with things is you'll get a benefit out of that.
Is it important to you to turn around and go, Joel has two options. He gets to concentrate on his own business solely, which in my head, in my heart, is maybe a little bit, how do I say it? I'm not, selfish is the wrong word, but to put it in context, when I went over to Melbourne, like I'm aware my accent is slightly different. I'm aware that things I've done are slightly different. And so you reach out to Melbourne Uni or whoever it might be, or London College of Garden Design, Melbourne branch, Brent, and you offer your time, you offer your voice, if you will, if it's of benefit. And thank God they saw something maybe worthwhile in me. Having to come back and say, no, you're fine, is probably the greatest insult. But like, you've got something more to give than just a guy who's experienced at landscaping. Is it important to you to make the industry a better place? Is that partly why you get involved?
No. I appreciate the people that do that, but that's just a byproduct of what I do. I think it's awesome people who will volunteer their time to do that sort of thing, and they're actively trying to make the industry better. But I'd be lying if I said that's why I do anything of what I do. It's just a nice side effect.
I'm one of 8 children, and I'm the lower half of the middle. So on one hand, I can't disagree with not wanting to be a part of a committee. However, if I'm asked to stand on a platform and speak free gratis, that's absolutely fine. I've no problem with that. Is that a little bit of what you're trying to say?
What do you mean?
Well, you'll give your time, but just not as part of the association to make a change in that regard.
Yeah, I don't know why I do it. Because I've done things like I've done. I just helped out at various events for Landscape Victoria, but I don't know. I think I just do it again to help them because I appreciate what they do. So I suppose it is kind of for that reason.
Time to get big-headed. Your best garden to date. Why?
It's hard to say because to date it's coming up the best one that we're going to do, because it's hard for me to choose one that someone else has designed because it's basically their design that we've built. So the best one that we've built is one that Paul Bangay designed. But if he didn't design it like that, it wouldn't matter who built it. It's like not necessarily wouldn't matter who, but a lot of people could have built it just as well. So the best one I've done at the moment is one that I've designed, but it's not anywhere near. It was only 110,000, so it's not as impressive as what one that's coming up will be.
So the one that's coming up is the one that Paul has designed, is it?
No, the one that's coming up is one I've designed, and it's going to be awesome. And that's a $30,000 one, so that's a lot more. It's going to be pretty cool. So, yeah,
I'm going to go in with a price of 125,000.
Well, it's too late. It's already signed up, so you can't have
it. Yeah. Why is it a good garden job?
Just because it's got it's got all the elements that I love in like my own garden, so that's why I like it anyway. So, it's just a real complete garden. It's got entertaining everywhere. Just really excited to see that one.
10 years from now, Joel Barnett is 50.
Correct.
I am particularly good at maths. There you go.
I saw you looking down at your calculator when you said that.
Never upset the host of the show. Jeez, Joel, you think you'd know at this stage of the game. But 10 years from now, you're 50 years of age. Where is In Style Gardens? What is Joel doing?
It'll most likely just be design by that stage, I reckon. Because I love the construction side of things, but can't do it forever. And I don't know if I've got the right personality to be able to have other people working for me, me not doing a lot of it, but we'll see how we go. Before I started working for the business, well, like when I was in the business, I didn't have plans on working for myself. I thought I'd never do that. So maybe I will be able to be like a construction manager and have other people working for me, so I won't have to do the physical work. So in a perfect world, that's what we'll still be doing, design and construction. But worst case scenario is just design.
Do we go and do some Q&A now, do we?
Yeah.
Can do that? Our first one. This is from a gentleman by the name of Ashley James. Why are we both laughing? The question is, do you think Joel mentions us on a regular basis because he's jealous of our rugged good looks and lush hair?
That'll be the first time someone said you got lush hair.
I do have lush hair, but that's
it's because
that's the question.
Every time I mention either one of you, the ratings just skyrocket. So get so many more downloads. So it's just work. That's purely using you both.
Yeah, well, I'm used to that. Albeit I didn't work in a nightclub for over 35-year-olds only. Let's go to the second question swiftly. This is from Megs Jane. What has been your worst and best day at work?
It was interesting that you asked about what the worst day was, because that was the worst day was when I realised that retaining wall was 120 mil out. The best day, I reckon, when I found out that the design I submitted got selected for the Flower and Garden Show in 2016. So when the boutique gardens competition. So because I'd had a bit of a spell from landscaping between 2012 and 15, and then got back into it seriously from then, and then entered the boutique gardens competition, and then the design I submitted got selected to get built. So that was when 2015 in November it was that we found out that we were going to be building it in March of next year. So that was probably one of the best days, I reckon.
Was that your first show garden, Joel?
That we had designed, or that I designed. So we did one in 2011 and 12 that students had designed and we built them. But the first one that I designed and built was 2016.
Wow. And did you get medal for that?
Yeah, because we got a bronze for that. The boutique gardens are first, second, and third. So we came third in that. And then the next year got second.
I was asked this question before, but in the same way the Beatles, maybe Music Analogy Time, did Love Me Do, and then did sort of I Am the Walrus or Sgt. Pepper's, if you get me. Do you look back on early gardens that you did and go, geez, that was crap?
Only the scale of it, because it's a 5 by 5 meter section garden, and the scale was horrendous in both of those gardens because I just had no idea. Because it's something like you don't usually build a garden that size. So when I drew it on a plan, it looked all right. But then when I built it and looked at it, we had a seat in there, like a curved fire pit area. Probably took up, I reckon it was probably 3 by 3 meters, I reckon, just for this massive fire pit. So it was way too big. So that, but other than that, the design I loved, and then so I loved the overall design, and that's why I think it's harder doing the achievable gardens and the boutique gardens than it is a show garden.
I agree with that statement, and I certainly looked at the site, the levels in the boutique garden, scratched my head and went, why would I even put myself through that?
Yeah.
Being brutally honest with you.
Your levels were difficult on your side as well. It was a fair bit of fall over the long distance.
Yeah, I know. Well, I look, I get that, and I understood what I was drawing when I drew it. But at the same token, I think a 45-degree angle versus a 10-degree angle. I think I'll take the 10 degrees if I might word it that way, But yeah, look, and anyway, we park my gardens to one side. This isn't my show. Well, it is my show, but it's not. I'm not the guest. Another question, albeit not a question, from a gentleman by the name of Ashley James. I'm unsure if this is a question, Joel, but I'll read it out anyway. He says, I'd abuse you for 10 minutes straight, chuck in a few jokes about an Irish garden designer, and call it a day.
See, he's just mentioning you as well. He's trying to get more ratings.
He struggles. I don't. I understand why he does what he does. Land art landscapes. How do you have time to do everything you do, mate? Now, he asks that question, and then he has a laughing emoticon after it.
Yeah, it's like you read the questions before I sent them through, because I've kind of answered some of them just coincidentally, but it doesn't take as much time as what it looks like. But also, I'm horrible at running a business, so something always fails. Like, I haven't got time for everything that I do. So at the moment, I'm working heaps on site, and then doing the podcast when I do. But there's always something that's failing or not getting enough time as it needs to do well. So at the moment, it's my emails. So I'm not getting back to a lot of emails. Because when I get home, sometimes I'm just exhausted. So at work, I'll think, I got an email come through. I'll sort that out when I get home, and then I get home and I can't be bothered. So I just rest and worry about it another day. And then next thing you know, it's 2 weeks later and you still haven't replied to that email. So there is. I'm not good at communication and keeping clients updated on a lot of things, but it's there used to be a video game where you had to spin plates and you had to keep spinning them, and the slower, when they start to get slow, if you didn't spin it, they'd fall over. And that's what I feel like I'm doing sometimes, just running around spinning all these plates so they keep spinning, trying to not let them fall to the ground. So far, none have broken.
I won't ask what year that video game was in, Joel, but we'll move on to the next question.
I think it was before the Atari came out. That's how long ago it was, but I remember it.
That is the year after the Etch-a-Sketch. Let's move to question number 14. And this is, I hope I pronounced this right, Claycon LC. They ask, what's the biggest change adoption you've seen or experienced within the industry?
That'd be when I first started for InStyle, like working as an employee. We were laying concrete pavers, and then some clients started to use natural stone, and I just thought it was the most amazing thing in the world. Yeah, these clients must be super rich because they can use this natural stone that they've imported from overseas. But concrete pavers were the most common thing, and then gradually, now concrete seems to be more expensive than natural stone. But yeah, back when I started, the concrete was the most common paver that we'd lay, and now and then it changed to natural stone, and so that was the biggest change, I reckon.
I was talking in London about 4 weeks ago. I had to give a quick talk over there. Anyway, none to the point. We were talking about garden design trends. And I was saying at one point in time, we had the log roll pandemic. I don't know whether you had that in Australia. A small piece of timber with a bit of wire mesh at the back, and you put it around the edging of your lawn and put some plants in between, circa 1980.
Yeah,
It then goes to the
I've pulled
cobble up
something out. Yeah.
driveway epidemic. And then from there, I think we went to the decking and then to grow your own, always at recessionary times anyway, park that to one side. And now we fast track them. We've gone past the porcelain pandemic again, and we're into the rewilding look, is something we've conversed on a previous episode of your show. Where do you sit on all of these trends? What's your favorite? What's your worst? And what do you see as the next one?
The architectural concrete is my favorite. So, like a lot of other countries don't use it as much as what we do in Australia, I don't think, for various reasons. Like they don't in the North America because of the frost heave. I reckon that's why they don't use it as much there for those states that get the freezing temperatures. But that's something I love at the moment, and I'm very slow to get on these trends. Like they've been around for 10 years, and then I think, oh yeah, I might try this new thing that's come out, but yeah, that's what I like to look of at the moment.
I saw your garden at Mifkas, obviously. I thought it was stunning. I particularly adored the. You're most welcome. I particularly adored the water feature, and more to the point, the fact that you had it slightly not as the focal point, which is how I guess I like to do it. But what struck me, and again, I'm referencing a bit of a conversation we've had a couple of times at this stage of the game. I don't ever see you going to the wild look where you're allowing weeds to grow in between a bit of crushed rock and some debris. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, although that is what my last house looked like. That was the wild look. There's some weeds that were taller than me there. Like I'm not very tall, I know, but they were still pretty tall. But yeah, I'm not a fan of that style. No.
No. Okay. Next question. How did you afford? How much did it cost you to buy your business off your old boss? That's from Bo Lestrange.
I don't mind saying the price, but I don't know whether he would want that said. But it was bugger all. So it included like the trailer and a lot of tools, like the whacker and the brick saw that I still have. I don't have to have the whacker actually, but like it included a trailer and a brick saw and some other tools. And since then I've made profit on jobs that are more than what I paid for it. So it was, and that's not because I make hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit on any jobs, because it was a really small amount. So and I got a loan for it because I didn't have any money as an employee. But yeah, it was not a lot of money.
Your final question is from Ed Landscapes, and they asked, "What's the best tip you've heard out of all of your guests?"
I got asked this question on one of the Q&A episodes, and I couldn't think of a good one then. And it's similar to when I reckon it was Liam Daly. I think his episode is out at the moment. But he said there's heaps of good bits of information in the podcast, but he said, I can't think of any off the top of my head. But it's just one of those things where you just gradually build up all those good things and you sort of subconsciously think about them. So I can't think of one, unfortunately. There's good episodes I can think of, but not individual pieces of advice.
We both had gardens at Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show, to give it its full title. I liked your garden. I hope that you liked the one that I designed, built by Sentin Landscaping. Sorry, I just banged an old set square. But the way, if I take the gardens out of it, what has been said about myself, because I don't really pay much attention to how I do things. So long as I say hello, goodbye, and thank you, they're the basics. I think the rest in the middle is pretty sort of simple. But the way in which it's being described to me of how I conducted myself there, I'll bite the gentleman thing again and never robbed an old lady's handbag, if you get me, was that I strolled in the door like one of the Bee Gees. I'm unsure why. and then strolled back out the door with a medal. Waved bye-bye to everybody, got on a plane and flew home. Now, I say that makes it sound very simple, but the point I'm making it, Joel, is like our characters, they're not assumed personas, but the character, the way I was reared, the way I speak, the way I conduct myself, the way I stand on stage, it's very different to you, to put it mildly. Is that a fair statement? Do you see where I'm coming from in this one?
Yeah. And then I saw you gave your medal away as well. That's the amount of disrespect you had for it.
Well, hold on. Let's clarify that. Let's clarify that, because you'll get me into trouble for that one. There's an 81-year-old woman who has, I think I did her garden when I was 17, and she has all the old VHS recordings of my early television stints and all the newspaper clippings. There's a drawer full of, and obviously not able to travel to Melbourne to see, and it's one of the few gardens she's never seen, but only in the latter years, if I may eloquently say so. And she was in my home for her 81st birthday. And what do you give a woman who's been your biggest fan for the last, 20 something plus years? And it was the right thing to do. So yeah, I hope
it's a pretty cool story, but I'll have to edit this part out.
And thank you for not making it about me. But if this is still recording and we're back into it now, then do you want to go back and try and answer the question?
Yeah. You haven't asked it though yet, have you?
Yeah.
What you just said that we're not the same person.
Basically, we're pretty different characters. And what I'll say to you, this is edited out, so please.
No, I'm keeping it all in.
But in context, what I don't want to say, like, you have a far quieter persona than I do. And I've no problem walking up on stage and saying, "Is it Elvis impersonation night?" Yeah, no problem at all. But you, if I go up and your house is on fire, or you're just holding a petal in one hand, the expression and the tone of your voice is exactly the same. Is that fair?
Yeah. That's
So do we bear with me? Do we cut it from here going backwards now to what I assumed was the question and then answer?
Nah, I'll just keep it all in.
Don't you even dream about it. I'll never be asked back to host this podcast again, Joel, if you do that.
But yeah, that's something that a lot of clients say to me, and I was just talking about it recently with a client. Like when people, like my appearance, because and one of my sons is exactly the same, but I just always look like I'm angry. And yeah, like you say, my voice is the same all the time. And people can't read me as well. Like, you don't know if I'm happy or sad. And it's just the way I am. Like, I'm not, and it doesn't bother me that I am like that. I know that I'm a good person and I'm, respectful of people. So just, the other people's opinion of me never bothers me. But I completely understand there's different, we are completely different people, but I don't see there's a problem with it.
No, there's no problem at all, Joel. And don't get me wrong, I've got 4 sisters and 3 brothers, and none of them are the same as me. And Mom used to say I was special.
I would agree.
So well, I know the whole world would agree with you and my mom, and you two would get on famously. But the point I'll make is very, very simple. There's 2 days to go in Mifkas. The rain has come down, if you remember it correctly. It's thundering out of the heaven, which is great if you have a 200 square meter water feature like I do. But in your case, you didn't. And you had a bathtub. And I went up to you whilst you were tiling, and not all of your planting was complete, and said, "How are you, Joel? You under pressure?" And you went, I won't do the Aussie accent, but you just went, "No, grand." I went, "Any news?" And you went, "No." And I went, "Right, I'll see you later." And you went, "Okay." and I thought it was hilarious, but ultimately I was saying, like, "Do you need some help? Do you want me to do a thing for you?" And you said, "No, it's grand. I think I have it all looked after." But you're right. It was just, but in my head, ultimately, I walk away from that and go, Joel is okay, because you have exactly the same persona ultimately in this case as me. If my house was on fire, I'd still be okay. And that references back to that comment I made about slapping yourself in the forehead, coming up with all the solutions when you were talking about swimming pools and the knock-on effect of in one incorrect measurement and a guy who did line marking for a living.
Yeah, it's like something that you are just the way you are. So yeah, I don't know the best way to answer it, but it's something that a lot of people mention it to me, how they don't know how to read me, and I'm the same when I'm being sarcastic, which people find hard because I sound exactly the same. I don't put any change on the way I say words. I just say exactly the same. So my two employees, they get confused. Like I might tell them that the concrete truck is coming that afternoon when it's actually booked for 2 days in advance, but they can't tell that I'm being sarcastic or not. So then they start to freak out. And then there's been times where they thought I was being sarcastic, but it was actually coming that afternoon. But that just makes it funnier for me. They can't.
I would agree with you.
But yeah, it's just one of those things that, yeah, it's not like I am it's not like I'm being someone who I'm not. It's like, it's the only personality I've ever had. So I don't know.
I referenced it before that I've got like a Rick Mail or an Andy Kaufman in my head. There's no badness in there. It's just wouldn't it be funny if we did X? And that sort of never left me. But now I'm obviously a bit taller and inverted commas more responsible. Or as my daughter would say it to me, in work that's extremely serious. Outside of work, it's off time. You can do what you want. Do you have that little fella on your shoulder or in your head that goes, "Go on, Joel, do it. It'll be hilarious"?
Yeah, way too much. now I've got kids, so now it's even funnier if I do things that kind of embarrass them, which is easy to do. But yeah, I love doing things like that. I turn up to. I don't do so much anymore, but like our friends would have a party, just like you normally do with your friends. Everyone comes around for a drink, and just like normal. And I would turn up dressed as a gorilla or in fancy dress, just to be an idiot. So I like doing things like that, just really weird things. And I still do things like that even now, just not as often.
Yeah, I was at Hampton Court Palace Flower Show. I think it was 2017 or 18, and my daughter replaced my entire wash bag, shaving kit, etc., with princess stickers, um, which is funny if you're her and you're on the phone to me live from the bathroom, but not if you need to have a shave and go and stand on a stage somewhere. Okay, park that to one side. So I filled her entire school bag with rice and cornflakes. Touche, far be it from me. Have you got one that's sort of at that level?
Yeah, my middle son, he definitely would do something like that. He's yeah, and yeah, all my kids, like I said it to my wife a few years ago, but how awesome it is having, because I've got 3 kids, and I think we've got a pretty good sense of humor as well, and now we've got 3 extra people in the house with the same sense of humor. So yeah, it's a fun place to be. So yeah, they do some stuff. And I'm not a good parent because my son will do something at school and he'll get in trouble, and I'll think it's hilarious. So I can't tell him off for doing it. So it's there's so many things that he does I did as well. So
yeah,
don't know if it's a good or a bad thing.
What's the worst CD you ever bought, or worst piece of music?
The first one I bought was Savage Garden. I think it's called "I Want You." They've just brought it out, a new version of it at the moment. It's it's quite an embarrassing song to admit. I bought a CD single of it back in the day. They're an Australian band. You wouldn't know.
I know exactly who they are. Is that the worst piece and the last piece you bought, or?
I I couldn't remember the last one I bought, but it was. I think it might have been Def Leppard, like a best of them. So I do have a very broad range of musical tastes.
Def Leppard I can live with. The mullet I don't think would suit me.
No, no, I've never been in that kind of phase. Not in a long hair band kind of thing, but yeah, I do like the heavy stuff. I bought Marilyn Manson CD as well. I liked that back in the day. So really weird stuff in there.
What's your usual outro?
I just thank the guest for coming on. Nothing. It's not a regular one. Oh, I do ask who you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast. Can't think of who I couldn't recommend anyone.
I haven't asked you the question yet, Joel.
Oh, sorry. Just preempting.
Yeah, but don't preempt just yet. You're not the host of the show. You're dealing with a professional here.
Yeah, that's why you touched your set square before, and I could hear it in the microphone.
That's that there, yeah. I've also got an old school compass beside it. Joel, before we bring this interview to an end, I'll take two on that. Stop! This is worse than trying to do the intro for you. Joel, very important question before I go. It's a question I ask all of I'd say all of my guests. Okay, take three. Take three. Joel, before we go, a question I ask all of my guests. If you could have, or if I should interview anybody, who would you recommend?
I've heard a lot of good things about Ashley James, so I think he would be good to interview. Actually, that'd be a good one. You can interview him as an episode. I do like that idea, actually.
I don't know how much we talk about horticulture in that episode, or how much of a horticultural answer I'd get back.
Are you saying he doesn't know much about horticulture?
No, what I'm saying is he might just answer me through the process of mime and bad boy band songs read backwards through a toilet roll insert while sucking on a quail egg, drinking tea tree oil, brushing his hair sideways as the wind blows through it, and Shania Twain whistles Dixieland in the background. I don't know what could happen. Anything.
Yeah, that's the thrill of it. I don't know how it'd work, because I'd have to. I don't know how I'd have to trust one of you to record it and then send it to me, or I could just be a third wheel and just watch. sounds inappropriate.
You have now got a couple of edits.
I'm not taking that out.
I'll leave that with you. Okay, fine. Finally, Joel Barnett, thank you for being my guest on this week's show. Genuinely and from the heart, huge fan of your podcast, huge fan of what you do for the horticulture industry. The world is better, as I've noted to you many times, because of what you do and what you give of your spare time. And it's genuinely been an absolute pleasure, my good friend.
Yeah, it's been an absolute joy on my end as well. And something I didn't mention it when you were saying it, but when you were saying how people said that you were just swanning in to the garden show and then swanning back out again, like I've seen the amount of interaction you've had with heaps of people who were involved, like a lot of the Achievable Gardens designers and the boutique gardens, and you've been interacting with them and providing support for heaps of people. So that doesn't go unseen. So you certainly weren't just coming in and going out. So thank you for everything you do for the industry as well.
Well, I think what was said to me, Joel, and thank you. Sorry, my apologies, by the way. But I think what was said to me was my response to it was, next time I'll wear a gold chain and let down a couple of extra buttons on the shirt. But I don't think that's a look that will attract another 100,000 visitors to an already established show. I think what they were sort of saying was that's the appearance that I gave when behind the scenes it was something completely different. And I can't emphasize enough, I certainly had the best of the best by my side. But in your case, albeit we were sort of semi-jovial about it, you equally gave the same appearance that your hair could have been on fire, and I go up and say, "Are you under pressure?" And you go, "No, everything's fine." So I think it was a sort of there was a professional, maybe pat on the back to, there's no panic. And I remember talking to Marcus Gale about it, and he said, good pros don't run around the place. They stroll. They might be running in their head, but it's always a stroll on the outside. So yeah, but you're gonna have to edit that, because now that's about me. And
Well, you are the
there you
host.
go. Well, I am the host, so I can say what I want.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure having me hosting this week's show. It's great to see me again on the podcast, and I can't remember our guest's name, but we're going to leave it there, and we'll talk to you this time next week. If you've got any questions, send me a note on Instagram. It's the Landscaping Podcast or In Style Gardens. Yeah, I'm the best looking host of this show ever in its history as well. We'll leave it there. Talk to you next week, folks. Thanks for listening.